Small towns in the countryside is exactly where I like to be. Time seems to pass slower here, and not much changes year to year, except for the toys that we play with. The toys I have seen throughout my lifetime have all been great, and they improve and evolve dramatically over time. And now today's toys are something an 80s kid never even thought possible. The Polaris 900 RZR is just the latest in my long list of toys throughout my life. I went with the 50-inch trail model with the Ultimate package. Here it is, brand spanking new and shiny at the dealer. And now I'm finally putting together my first year of ownership and my experiences so far.
First ride, first start.
I feel I have just moved up from the Polaris Sportsman 500 to this RZR. There are various reasons for me doing so, but the most important one is so I can have my little sidekick with me more.
Hey!
Spares you the details of me actually breaking this in for the first 20 hours. They want you going real slow, real easy. I kept it about 5,000 RPM, and one more hour it'll be ready for the break-in oil to be out and put the proper oil in, and then I'm gonna run it like it should, and I'm gonna begin testing. Yeah, the engine is finally broken in. So with the break-in being complete, this brings me to the first subject I'd like to cover, and that is maintenance. Now if you take a closer look here, the oil filter has an odd bracket on it that creates a strange angle, making it impossible to put an oil filter socket on the end of it. Instead, you're stuck using oil filter pliers, not to mention the giant unavoidable mess that comes from removing the oil filter at this angle. Other than that, the oil change is very straightforward and simple, and something I believe anybody could do just at home by themselves. I mean, what a dumb location. Like really, look at this. The dealer gave it to me a little low on coolant, and I think watching me trying to add it speaks for itself.
It's so stupid.
The RZR Trail is clearly using parts that are made for other machines.
Yeah, I rest my case.
Keep in mind, Polaris mass produces these parts for their best-selling machines, and then reuses them wherever they can to keep their engineering costs down. After the first oil change, I added what I consider the most essential protection part, and that is the front bumper. So the 50-inch trail model is not equipped with the 1000cc power plant. Instead you get the 900, which in my opinion is plenty powerful. And of course a 1000cc would be better and faster, but this is plenty enough to keep me happy. There is nothing I have ever ridden with that is dramatically overpowered compared to this. And even after a year, I'm still not bored with the power. So I will let you know the advantages of owning a 50-inch RZR, as it is relevant to the review, and a definite question I get asked, as most people seem to prefer the bigger bikes. I have found that about 70% of the trails I ride on would easily fit the 60-inch 1000 model, and the rest of them would be totally off limits. I bought this machine wanting versatility. I wanted to be able to ride with any group of riders, no matter what they were on. Most of the time, I end up riding just with me and my little sidekick. But I do ride with many groups of people, riding various types of machines. And more often than not, I'm the only side-by-side in the entire group. The people I ride with also ride for many different reasons, and I didn't want to have to miss out on any of them. So that being said, this machine needed to be very maneuverable to ride with ATVs on tight trails. And the perfectly tight turning radius and the amazing electronic power steering is probably my favorite attribute.
So this is neutral and perfectly straight, just as you see the wheel right now. One complete rotation to the right, and it's maxed out, steering as hard as it can to the right. Rotate back to the left, you're back at straight. One complete rotation to the left, and you're all the way to the left. And what that does is this gives this a really great handlebar-like feel to the steering.
Another part of this machine's extremely good maneuverability comes from its 50-inch width. Something that happens to all people riding trails, with a great variation depending on the rider, is a navigation slowdown. When you are picking out your line of navigation between two trees, you always slow down a little bit as you go through to make sure that you can pass without hitting your sides. And everybody slows down to a degree when the trails tighten. And the 50-inch machine is going to give you an instant and obvious advantage on these tight trails that will be especially noticeable when running with ATVs and bikes. The Ultimate package comes equipped with Polaris' Ride Command, with buttons along the bottom for digital gauges, built-in navigation, Bluetooth to your phone, settings, a music button for now playing, and volume up and down. And I would call the Rockford Fosgate audio pretty good. Sometimes at higher RPMs and running hard, the audio isn't very clear, but for the most part it's great, and definitely a good reason to upgrade to a package that has it. The Ride Command and the built-in audio are so good that I would really have to reach for a criticism, but I guess the lack of diversity in gauges is one of them, as you can display the speedometer and the RPMs 3 different ways at the same time. I also love the dim blue accent lighting on the floors for night riding. Which of course brings me to the great LED headlights on the Ultimate package. There really isn't a whole lot to say about them. They're great, they look great, and you can see everything. Something else that is a part of the whole Ride Command system is the backup camera. And while it is definitely useful, most of the time I just end up looking backwards.
It does tend to get very covered in mud and water, but the resolution is also extremely low, but it is still a pretty useful thing for seeing where you're going backwards, as long as it's clean.
Really, there's no such thing as a useless backup camera. And this is the RZR Trail, made for the tight trails. And it's of no surprise that this is where this machine shines the most. In both ranges, but especially in low, the RZR Trail has a great predictable power band that can easily be used to steer with your back tires. But sometimes, on the very average stock tires, the power can get away from you a little bit, especially on wet grass. The suspension on the trail is probably more than adequate for most people. They provide a great comfortable ride and suck up much of the punishment that the trails are going to give you. However, this is the area on which a wider bike with more suspension travel and ground clearance, which I'll get into later, would provide a much larger advantage. Now, for a noticeable difference in ride quality, you would really need to push this machine. However, as good as the shocks are, this machine is not going to handle awkward trail obstacles like a wider machine would, or an ATV with a much shorter wheelbase. But for a side-by-side with much shorter chassis than most, I would call the suspension more than adequate and borderline impressive due to what its limitations are due to size.
So the one thing I want to briefly talk about is the engine brake. The trail model is equipped with the engine brake, and for the most part, going in low range like the rest of this machine is where it's designed for. This is where it shines. This is where it works the best. Now, if I just go down this hill, the engine brake will carry me down this at a very, very slow speed. And it's very predictable and works just as it should.
Probably the best way to describe how the engine brake works is not going to be translatable for most people, but it really is the most accurate comparison that I can think of in the real world. Picture driving a truck, except it's empty, and the Jake brake is 3-stage, but is set at a random setting that you'll never know or be able to predict, and sometimes doesn't even come on at all. Now I'm sure that doesn't mean much to a lot of you, but some of you will get it. The engineering of the engine brake is no surprise after all. This machine seems focused on low range and the tight trails, and it can almost be called dominant in those conditions. But the jack of all trades title I would like to give this machine is also into question in high range. This machine is still at home, even very much at home, but I would not call it dominant. So my machine is very basic. It has the basic stock tires, the basic stance, and the basic lift. And this machine, of course, being a four-wheel drive, is still very capable of mud and deeper water. I have been nothing short of impressed in the places that this thing will go. Even when I didn't think I should do it, it still made it without any effort. So again, I get back to the topic of jack of all trades, which is what I was looking for when I bought this machine. I wanted something that felt just as at home on the open fields and trails as it did the tight trails or the mud. Whether it was with bigger side-by-sides or ATVs and bikes. And coming up from a quad to a side-by-side, obviously I wanted the ability to haul 2 people, even my fully grown friends. We are both of above average height, about 5'11" or 6 foot, and this machine is designed to give us plenty of headroom and legroom. I also wanted to be able to ride in the weather, and with the cab enclosure, that is something this machine easily does. I believe this machine does all of those things and does it pretty well. Overall, it is very, very impressive, and I'm very happy with owning it. I only think it falls short in one area, and this area unfortunately is pretty detrimental, pretty unnecessary, and something I believe Polaris is well aware of and just unwilling to change. And if you couldn't tell, those were bottom outs. Now on Polaris' website, they advertised the Polaris RZR 900 Trail Ultimate as having 11 inches of ground clearance. Also on their website, you can get a 360-degree view of your build. And I couldn't help but notice when I was going through mine that the suspension has a certain posture to it that does not represent reality. The actual posture of the Polaris rear has a very flat posture with a very unimpressive 9.5 inches of ground clearance. Here you can see the completely under-engineered Kawasaki 220 Bayu easily defeating the Polaris RZR Trail in ground clearance. I'm not even sure why they bother to say 11 inches of ground clearance when both ends of the machine are not of the same height, as you can't pass an object 10.5 inches high without hitting it. This side-by-side comparison made me very aware of this machine's shortcoming in this category, and it's super noticeable on trails that the bigger machines have torn up. It seems to me on a trail machine that advertising correct ground clearance would be an essential, and yet for trails like this machine quickly becomes a nightmare. Now what is advertised says something very clear to me, that Polaris knows that this would be an issue for most buyers, and they make sure on their website they say, don't show it to sit like it actually sits, instead show it to have the same posture as in the front, because they know it would be very unpopular, yet they choose to do nothing about it. And in my humble opinion, Polaris is knowingly deceiving their their customers. Now 2021 did come with some design refreshes of this machine, and I'm wondering why not have a design refresh where the machine performs and looks as it's advertised? The only answer I can think of is that they just don't care. Most people that are buying 50-inch machines have to buy them, and they don't have a lot of options. And they are also not their biggest selling machine, so they're not going to dump engineering cost into them. Now, with that big glaring defect out of the way, I can say overall, the 900 Trail is my favorite toy that I've ever bought, and I thoroughly enjoy it. It is definitely my favorite purchase since my 1999 400EX that I bought new at launch. I set out to purchase a jack-of-all-trades side-by-side. And that is exactly what I got in the end. This machine does everything it's designed to do very, very well, with a few shortcomings and one major shortcoming in my opinion. I would love to say that this is the master of tight trails, and maybe it is, but I can't certainly give it that recommendation, so I will call it a jack of all trades and master of none. So I guess overall I'm pretty happy with the machine. It's taken me to a lot of cool places in very good style. I can't say that I have any buyer's regret at all, but what it does leave you for is hungry for accessories and improvement. In the end, that's also a design feature of any of these side-by-sides today. If you have any questions that I didn't cover, or wish to see anything from this machine in the future, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.